Hello there. On the bench today, I have a used 3D printer. It is a very old, very used, and of extremely dubious provenance. I thought I'd go over it with y'all because I get a lot of questions on used 3D printers. Are they a good deal? People trying to buy these things off Facebook Marketplace, and you don't really know what's going on with it until you give it an eval. The question of used versus new is easier if you know the seller and the machine is a stock, reputable brand. But 3D printers can print their own parts, so often you're going to be looking at a modified machine and wondering if those mods were installed correctly or if they ever worked at all. I've seen dozens of unrecognizable enders where the owner had swapped out the extruder, linear motion components, or even the electronics. And those are all nice upgrades. And it's amazing how well you can do with upgrading your ender. But this is a video about evaluating a new-to-you printer. This one is more of a historical curiosity, but it's also interesting to see how far we've come in terms of printing. So, when I'm saddled with a printer of ill repute, you gotta look for the features first. This guy is relatively simple. I believe it was kit built. I see it has clicky end stops, a fair whack of zip ties. The axes are there's a decent amount of play in there. Kind of astonishing. The belts are nice and tight. We have a belt drive, y-axis up here. The bed is your x-axis, driven by a motor underneath. Look at that. That motor's hiding. It's shy. But then a screw drive, z-axis, on a spring. So this will be a little bit wobbly for the Z as well. These couplers aren't a terrible idea, but just... yeah. So, this is how the printer came to me, and it was obviously built from a kit, but I don't know who built it, and it's claimed that the person who gave it to me wasn't the person who built it. Maybe he just doesn't want me to judge their... looks like the belt tensioner as you pull it and squeeze the zip tie. Oh no, there's a real belt tensioner in there. If you can see in here. Take a look from here. Real belt tensioner. So these two screws in there, they're belt tensioning. I do notice that there is no heated bed. So that's just a bare aluminum sheet, but it does have some threaded screw holes. So I'm guessing we can add a bed to it. Electronics. It did not come with a power supply. It's got a hole for power, a USB. If you look in there, I don't see anything in the USB hole. That doesn't bode well. How are you supposed to talk to the board if it doesn't have a USB or an LCD? Interesting. We'll do some more research on it. First off, is it safe to turn this on? Well, seems to be reasonable on travel. Nothing's binding up on it. Ooh, last feature I forgot, it does have I believe, an induction sensor. So metal bed, skinny. It's not going to be, it might be capacitance, but I believe it's skinny as induction. So this would be the same technology as the Pinda probes from Prussia, but this is a standard off-the-shelf industrial component. And there's a lot of dust on this too. One thing I'm a little worried about, you have an all-metal extruder and a all-plastic hot end with no cooling fan on it. There's a cooling fan back here that's hitting the lower section. This is a silicone sleeve. Fiberglass heater and thermistor look nice and easy to replace. This sort of thing is always not great. You have a locking connector to a little Panasonic ones that'll just fall out mid-print. This, I believe, is going to the bed level sensor, the bed height sensor. So automatic leveling on an entry-level printer was pretty revolutionary when this guy came out. which I believe is 2013. I do want to get it running as a historical curiosity. Is it a 12 volt or a 24 volt machine? Well, the cooling fan is 12 volts. That's give you a good clue. It is a Printrbot, and I believe the printer board can handle 12 or 24 volts, but I don't want to shock the machine. You can see the USB. It even says USB on the board there. It looks like the connector was ripped off. So maybe this is why I got this for the low, low price of, please get it out of my house. Anyways, a 12 volt barrel jack connector for a printer that doesn't have a heated bed. It's going to be pretty low voltage, pretty low amperage. I mean, 12 volts is low, but whatever. You don't need a lot of power. Probably 3 or 4 amps will do it. I'll see if I can find a 5 or 6 amp one just to be safe. And we'll plug it in and see if we can get any commands. Without a USB, I'm not sure. Let's take a look at the printer board. And you can see it was kit built by someone who was pretty conscientious. Everybody's labeled with tape. Here's... what's going on there? I guess that's the power input. It spreads it out from... so you can power the motors and the heater separately. It's not hooked up. There's a big I2C connector. Ooh, there is a... yeah, so it does have the ability to have a heated bed. It's just not currently installed. And we do have a SD card slot and an expansion slot, so I might be able to hook up an LCD and an SD card to get this guy printing. I don't want to bother tracing around everything. I want to see if we can get it running just more as a historical curiosity than anything else. And this is a Printrbot Simple. I believe this is like a 2013 version because that's the first one I remember that had the probe, but the rest of it looks pretty, well, the later variants were improved. It's not the first Printrbot, but I believe it's still one of the early Kickstarter, maybe their second Kickstarter, something like that. But if we can get it powered and communicate with it, and do some pre-flight checks, and we'll see if we can get it printing. In terms of bang for your buck, it's a tiny PLA-only printer. Looks like the print area is about 4 inches. The bed is much wider than that, but if you look at the travel, we're missing out on a whole inch on either side. So, if we throw a heater on there, it might be able to handle PETG or something, but I wouldn't really bet on it. A Phillips head screw, just like Curiouser and Curiouser. So if I do this, yeah, it's increasing the tension on there. Okay. I have seen the Printrbot parts before. It's just been some time. It looks like there's a pretty good filament guide. Oh no, it is a 175mm printer. It's just this part, I believe, was designed so it could do either 3mm or 175, which means it'll be much better at one than the other. This probe will sense at about 2mm, so I'm going to have to raise it up a good bit. Nothing on this printer is all that tight. It might not be a great sign, but remember, Printrbot used to come with baby wrenches to do this for you. But finger tight will probably be good enough to get this printing. Anyway, I'm going to take a minute to research the rest of this and see if I can get an LCD hooked up. I'll come back, touch base with you all in a minute. Welcome back. I found a nice diagram from John Fuller's 7-year-old YouTube video showing how to hook up the LCD, which will let me run the machine through its paces easily. Printrbot is notorious for using non-standard parts. I've got the version F4 motherboard, which seems to be identical. Did use these female jumper wires to make custom cable. Thankfully I had another old RepRap discount LCD lying around. Another company that's no longer in here. Also found a 5 amp 12 volt power supply. So it should let us power on the device. And I don't know if this is overconfidence or not, but I already made a printer profile and loaded a first print on here. What do you think? We're gonna get lucky? Normally I don't like plugging stuff into the motherboard with the power on, but kind of want to see that stuff is working. And on this particular board, we have the LCD connections and the click encoder. And I think one of those click encoder is just a little rotary. This is not connecting up the SD card, so we're going to have to use the SD card on the Printrbot motherboard. Yeah, I got the female Fremo from Adafruit. Lovely prototyping. It's indispensable for these sort of temporary, unless it works jobs. There we go. I have no card. Now some of the symbols are messed up, probably because I powered it on and then plugged in the LCD. The old board's brand new. And the pro tip is you never remove the cover from your, that's a little piezoelectric speaker. Probably need to restart it when we put the SD card in as well. It is reading the SD card. Everything seems to be going perfectly. So it looks like this probably was a good use machine until the USB was ripped off. Let me flip this guy back around. So now that we have communications to the printer, we can check that the axes and the heaters actually work. First thing we want to check is the bed level sensor. And you notice it's not triggering. If you guys can see the trigger. I don't want to move around too much with my ribbon cable. But there's a little red light on top that shows you when it's triggered. And it will only trigger under metal, because this is a induction sensor, not capacitance. Capacitance will trigger on anything. But it's a full metal bed, so that's not a problem. We just can't add glass to it with any real thickness. Now there's no cooling fan on the barrel of the extruder, but let's go in the prepare menu, see if we can. And this is the print cooling fan. You see it's not cooling the cold side of the nozzle. And the hot side is quite large. Kind of want to pull the, yeah. I don't want to mess with it until we have to. But with the cooling running, because I don't want to overheat this, I'm going to start first, see if we can move the axes around. I don't really know how big it is, which is, that is awesome. So we did check that our homing sensor is working. I have it lined up so that it's pretty close to the bottom. It's going to need to come upwards a bit to be a non-contact sensor. You'll see it turns on right about there. It should be about 2 to 4 millimeters. This one doesn't appear to have any sort of fine-tuning on top. But the X and Y will move. I don't know why it won't let me move the Z from the menu. Oh, it's probably just the distance. Yeah, so you move Z. Well, at home. Homing works. Let's home it again and see if it actually set the 0. So on these non-contact sensors, saying Z is at 1, so we really want the extruder to be a millimeter up off the bed at this point. And it's about 2. So I'm raising this sensor lower the nozzle. Do that one more time. And it does not look like we can actually change the Z offset. It's fixed at 1 millimeter. at least from the LCD, which is not really how this is intended to be controlled. It's supposed to be hooked up to your computer, but I don't really want to solder on the board if I don't know if it works. Okay, last thing to check is our hotend still functional? Interestingly, it has 3 nozzles that it's reading, or that's able to set, as well as the bed. So the firmware is designed for any modifications you do. You don't have to mess with the firmware. I'm more interested in it. Can it hold a reasonable temperature? Oh yeah, she's getting hot. Kind of hilarious that you'd be able to fire something up. I believe it's 2013. It might be a 2014 version. The other issue, there were more than a few variants of this that came out, you know, in series, and they all had some minor differences. We have our bed sensor, so we're doing better than some, but yeah, we're holding temperature. I mean, we're getting a lot of heat up here. I feel like I'm gonna have to add a cooling fan. Extruder's rolling very slowly. And we're extruding. We're getting some, last filament out was a nice lovely red. Since bed is here, so the printer should know that it doesn't have a heated bed, but it's just not configured. Good enough, we'll just turn the bed off. And it does not have, I did ask it to do automatic leveling. I don't believe that's supported by firmware this old. I don't quite know how old the firmware is, but it's something we could configure. Oh no, we aren't automatic leveling. Three-point leveling? I've not seen that before. But there's really no EEPROM settings. The only thing we can change is the flow rate. So if I want to adjust the distance between the nozzle and the bed, I can do that manually by just adjusting the Z. I should probably calibrate it better first, but Z, it says, is at 0.81. There's also no way to actually level this bed if the bed is at any sort of angle. That's what that 3-point leveling should work out, but there's no way to adjust it if it is. And given how loosey-goosey everything is, I'm not even sure I can make it better. Should be 0.81, so I'm kind of just eyeballing the gap here. And I'll be adjusting it manually, fighting the stepper. Another nice thing on these is it leveling itself or not? And it is. Nice to have visual indicator that the extruder is still extruding. It's not bad at all. It's kind of a rough, gross first print. The lack of adjustable leveling is going to be a huge pain. I need to, let's see, lower the sensor to raise the nozzle now. I'm going to wait for the temperature to go down. The other fun is there's no way to get the SD card out, like with human-sized fingers. It doesn't know, it doesn't have a sensor that there's an SD card inserted, so it doesn't know when to reread it. Alright, I'm going to put a different file in here. Right, so the print quality, it's not as bad as you might think. The reliability was quite poor. You can see just the very bottom layers. Looks pretty good. Problem is, this nozzle clogs up very easily. I open it up to see why. I'm getting too much heat getting into the cold part. And I did attempt this print with many different settings, trying to run the machine as cold as I could, and it was just kind of, well, let me check my parts bin, see what I got. E3D V6 GOLD fits right on there. I did actually have to make a 10mm spacer to lower it down so that it doesn't interfere with the wooden carriage down here. The other change I made to the machine is this is a 24-volt hot end. So I had to change the entire machine to 24 volts. To do that, plugged in a 24-volt power supply. Since there's no heated bed, the only things we have to worry about are the fans and the hot end heater, and then this induction sensor is also running off of mains current. Datasheet says you can go anywhere from 12 to 36, so 24 is right in that range, we're good there. The only thing I still need to replace is this fan. If I run this 12-volt fan at 24 volts, it will melt. And this is always on, because there's no other controls on there, but I think it's reasonable for a test. I'm going to try to load it up, see with the same, we'll do the exact same print, and see if we get better results. Fucking, this is actually pretty accurate. So that was a 2 hours and 40-minute print. Well, let's just take a look at it. Stuff really well. So you see all these layers, all the subtle shifts. That's down to this machine being quite wobbly, and especially when you get out here. The amount of force it takes to jolt around is extraordinarily low. The bed is, well, actually, the bed's got a decent amount of wiggle too. That's likely due to the zip ties holding the bearings on. I mean, you can literally feel the zip ties moving. Might be able to put stronger ones on there, but even with no print cooling, and this is at a 0.3 layer height, so this is low resolution. It's more just, hey, can I do a long print? I think this is as far as I'm going to go on this machine in terms of making it functional. I want to make a nice stand for the screen, have it connected a little bit better so it's a little less prone to wear and tear. Maybe make it a handle or something, but this will go for cons. In terms of upgrades, like if this was a machine that had a unique capability, if it was surprisingly large or fast, I would likely be upgrading the electronics, mainly to get around the old firmware so I could flash norm. As you recall, this was missing its USB input. Probably not that hard to resolder on an external or like a USB dongle, but I think it's in a reasonable shape and a reasonable level effort. The hotend add-on was about $100 upgrade. This is an E3D V6 GOLD. Its thing about it is it's quite old and it came out of my parts bin. This came off of a printer that went to a Revo because I was looking for the quick change nozzle. It's actually got a hardened steel nozzle on there, which is a really silly thing to have when you don't have a heated bed. And you can see the amount of damage the blue tape took just from that quick. I'll likely come and put a build tack surface or something like that on here, but you really do need to keep it extremely thin because the nozzle, sort of the sense distance on this, the probe can only sense metal. So the thicker build plate you put in there, the closer your sensor is going to be to the nozzle and catch your prints. But hey, Printrbot Simple is cute. I think it works. Happy printing.